complimentary. It's a complimentary service that we're offering one time a month. It's always going to be the last Tuesday of every month, unless otherwise stated, due to holidays or something of that nature. And our goal is to bring to you, to the health and safety community, resources that have specialize in your area. So just different topics that we might be looking at exploring, not only today, but in the future, would be things like power industrial vehicles and new safety features around those. We've done these related to knife safety, ergonomics. So we're looking at pulling in a variety of different topics to allow the people from, the health and safety arena to have a knowledgeable, competent, free resource that's offered one time a month to go over things. The other thing I want to mention is that following this course, we will put out a short survey, if you wouldn't mind filling it out. On that survey, we're going to ask for feedback not only on Eric, who I'll introduce to you guys here in a moment, but also we're going to ask for your thoughts and opinions on various topics that might be of interest to you moving forward. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a whole couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes to fill that out for us at the end of the session, we would greatly appreciate that. And without further ado, I'm going to hand the reins over to my friend and colleague, Eric Gislason. He is the president or executive director for NASP. He is going to be far more competent at introducing himself and his credentials. But I will turn over the keys to him. And Eric, please take it away. Thank you so much for being here for us today.
Thank you, Melissa, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you folks and taking a little time out of your day, especially during lunch, to chat about some of these interesting acronyms that we have in the world of OHS and EHS. So my name is Eric Gislason. I am the executive director and the CEO of the National Association of Safety Professionals. Gosh, I've been doing this for about 33 years, so I'm old. And watched the EHS and the OHS field grow and develop and segmentalize into a lot of areas of discipline. So for you guys that are newer to the industry, it can be a little tough to kind of navigate. I've had several designations in the past. I currently hold my Master Safety Professionals with the NASP. And we're going to chat in the next 45 minutes or so on a lot of these terms that we tend to bounce around in the field of OHS and EHS, and really kind of put some definitions to them and make you guys understand what is certified, what is qualified and competent, and see which direction you think you might be wanting to head in from a professional development perspective and just career development in general. So for those of you guys that don't know about NASP, the National Association of Safety Professionals, we've been around for a while. We were established in 2000, so my gosh, that's 23 years. I've been with the company since late 2014. We do training all over the world, just as Ergo Factors worldwide, so we probably do about 25% of our business overseas. We are what we refer to as IACET accredited. That's one of the highest designations for companies that are doing continuing education. And then about 3 years ago, we decided that there are certificates and then there are certifications, and we are also a certifying body for ANAB. It's the ANSI National Accreditation Board. So we have 2 certifications that are accredited by that agency. And we'll get into all that and what that means. And we do a lot of online training. We do classroom training, which is the open enrollment. We hold these courses all over the United States. And then we come to you from the perspective of the client or customer and do a lot of site-specific training for you guys as well. Excuse me, we are VA approved for reimbursement, and we also do scholarships for individuals who can't quite afford some of this training. So look us up when you get an opportunity, and there'll be some more information about us at the end of this presentation. So let's start off, because folks, I hear this a lot. I'm a certified safety trainer, or I'm certified by OSHA, or I've taken this course, so I'm certified. We have courses that have the word certified in them too. There is a difference, however, between a certification and a certificate. Okay. And that's not my definition. That is ANSI, the ANSI Accreditation Board. They have very specific differences. And they, again, we use them interchangeably, but they're distinctly different. So let's talk first about certifications versus certificates. And then we'll kind of get into some of the more well-known certifications and certificates and where you think maybe, and believe me, if you have questions along the way, Melissa, I'm not going to be paying attention, or whoever's moderating. Please interrupt me, because I'm not a fan of online, because I love the interaction and the dynamics of a classroom course. But let's face it, in this world today, we have to do some of these webinars. But stop me mid-sentence. It doesn't bother me at all, because I'd love to have a chat and a discussion. Or if you have a generalized question, we can wait till the end of the presentation and have a discussion then. So
I will be throwing questions at you, Eric, as they come up, for sure.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So at a glance, over an overarching theme, really what it boils down to is, if you look on the left side of the column, you've got, oh, I'm sorry, and I just jumped. You've got certificates that are received as a successful completion of training and education. That can be new and that can be experienced professionals. And basically, folks, it boils down to completion of a course. So you take a course. Now, our certificate courses, you are required to take a test to receive that certificate. Not all certificate courses do. Some of it is, I attended a course and I want that piece of paper that says I attended the course, and there is no test of competency, but that's fine. It doesn't require it, but we typically recommend it. And again, it's usually listed on a resume in the education section, basically educational credentials, et cetera, et cetera. And basically what it says is that you know what you know because you took that class. A lot of times it can be a gateway to a degree or prepare for a certification. And I'm going to tell you how. A lot of these courses, if they are accredited and you can receive CEUs, you can transfer that in to academic credits. And I'll kind of give you a rundown of that later. A certification, and instead of reading each one of these lines, because I hate reading slides, folks, that is a way to determine competency through testing. Okay. A certification is not a course. It can include a prep course. We have prep courses for our certification. BCSP has prep courses for their certification. IHMM has prep courses for their certification. But it is an actual exam that you are measured against professionals in your field. And that exam is typically third-party proctored. It's typically closed book. Okay. And it determines whether or not you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do what you're doing. This is typically where you get that post-nominal designation. Maybe it's an MSP, maybe it's a CSP, maybe it's a CHMM, maybe it's ergonomics related. We'll talk about that as well. There's so many areas of discipline, but a certification is an actual exam that you take, and you typically have to apply. There's an application process. Do you have the academic background? Do you have the experiential background? Do you have other credentials in place? And I'll kind of lay out some examples of that as we progress through the slide deck. Okay. So that in a nutshell is certification versus certificates. So again, a certificate, you take an academic program of study, it provides education, it's designed for specialized knowledge, you can get the continuing educations from it. Typically, there's not eligibility requirements. I'll give you a good example of that. We teach a certified safety manager course. It's foundational in nature. It's a 40-hour course. You can either go through the classroom version, which I recommend, or you can do it online. But either way, there is no pre-qualification requirements for that. And on most of these, there's not. I will make a couple of points on that with those last two bullet points. It's good to see if the organization that you're getting this training from is either IACET accredited, that's International Association for Continuing Education and Training, or some other accrediting agency for CEUs. It's one of those things that everybody and their brother sometimes looks like on the internet. If you type in safety training, you're going to get a lot of different stuff. Just be careful. There is also these ANSI, if you look at that last bullet point, the ANSI Z 490.1 and 490.2. I love that ANSI finally got it into their heads that these programs and these trainers should have training curriculum and training guidelines for adult training methodologies for the EHS profession. There's a lot of emphasis now about the training, that it's really going to be training that people digest and they retain, and it's got to be interactive and it's got to be dynamic. And that's kind of how we built our foundation at NASP, is that very, very aggressive style of training. That's not the, information dumping, reading slides, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying that NASP is the only company that does that. There's other companies that do that. But the point is, make sure that they at least tried to meet these ANSI guidelines. The 490.1 is for the trainers, and then the 490.2 is for online training. That it is, that there's gamification and there's reinforcement tools, and they're really actually, have you been through some of the safety training online that you can just click through and go to the test? That's really not worth the money that you paid for. So that's certificates. Folks, there's common safety certificates out there. NASP provides a variety of them. I already told you about the CSM. That's a 40-hour. That'd be equal to 4 CUs. We have higher level designations like the safety director and safety professional. My gosh, we got 75, and this is not a plug for NASP. We're just one of many industries that have these professional development courses. I can tell you the safety professional certificate, this third one in the line here, that's worth 242 hours of training. It's intense. It's 25 different OSHA topics, and it really gets intense. Now, a lot of you guys may be familiar with OTI, OSHA Training Institute. That's another good organization. There are many organizations across the United States that are OTI centers, okay? And they do a variety of different topics too. If I want to take an OTI course on, say, machine guarding, or lockout, tagout, or even ergonomics, they have them. But their big ones are the 501 and 511, which is for general industry. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on this in a second. And
Hey,
then
Eric.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Natalie has a question
Sure.
when it's.
No, I did not. Sorry. I don't know what I did to have a question.
Oh, no problem. Sorry about that, Eric.
Anna, you just better wait till the end of the class then. I'm just kidding. Okay, so we got the general industry and construction, okay, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail because that's one of those ones that are pretty foundational, and I like them for a variety of different reasons. So I'll get into OTI a little bit more detail. ASC, that's the Alliance Safety Council. They do what's called a COS and a COSM. Okay, so the COS, both of these are 40-hour courses. They are more construction related, but they're very reputable, excellent organization, and they do a lot of good things but they tend to be more construction related. Folks, you should all be familiar with the National Safety Council. National Safety Council does a variety of different training, and one of their really good ones for the safety professional is their Advanced Safety Certificate. And folks, there are tons of regional certificate programs out there. We don't have time to list them all out. In North Carolina, they've got what's called a MESH program, and it's a variety of different topics that you take. And I think it's equal to about 132 hours. And then you get a MESH certificate. TEAGS down in Texas, Texas and A&M, and some of these have great programs. Georgia Tech. So when you're looking for training and you're wanting to go to classroom courses and you want it to be more localized, check with your university systems, okay? Typically, your university systems will have some programs that are OHS and EHS designations. Again, if I didn't list your certificate on there, that's no slight to you. There's lots and lots of them out there, but these are some of the more well-recognized. Now, let me kind of go back to the OTI, because this is a big one. And folks, I do a lot of review of resumes, a lot. and I'll see people list themselves as OSHA certified trainers. Folks, if you are listing yourself as an OSHA certified trainer, that is a falsehood. There is no such thing as OSHA certified. We'll get into that in a little more detail in a minute. Okay. If you take these 501, and so the 500 and 501, there's no prerequisites to that. Basically the 500 and the 501 and the 510 and the 511, there's 2 weeks of training for each of them. So if I want to go general industry, I'm going to go 501 and 511. Okay. If I want to go construction, I go 500 and 510. Part of it is the regulations and part of it's the train the trainer part. Okay. Then if upon completion of that 2 weeks, and you need to have 5 years of experience to take those, we'll call them certificate courses that you're allowed to issue these 10-hour cards and 30-hour cards. Okay. You have to have 5 years of experience, or you can be a CSP or CIH or an OHS degree with 2 years of experience. So you take these 2 weeks of training, and then you can go back to your facility and teach your students on 10 hours of OSHA compliance. Or let's say they have more collateral duties. Let's say they're a supervisor, or maybe they're some of your safety committee members. Then you can teach them on 30 hours, and you can issue an OTI, OSHA Training Institute card from the Department of Labor. And it's nice. There's some drawbacks to it. What they say on this is you're not supposed to do site-specific training. It's general awareness training. So there's other agencies that do 10 and 30-hour cards, including NASP, Alliance Safety, some of these other organizations. But OTI, if you've got an opportunity to do it and you want to be able to issue those cards, it's a good organization. It's good information. Okay. Any questions on the OTI aspect of it? I get a lot of questions on that. There is a difference between you being the trainer as far as resume building. You want to take if you're general industry, you want to take the 501 and the 511 and be an instructor. A lot of people will put on their resume, hey, I did a 30-hour compliance course. Well, that's great, but that's not very high level. If you're just starting out into the safety business, fine, take a 30-hour course as just an introduction to all these safety training requirements. But when you've got some experience under your belt, being an authorized trainer does look a little bit better on the resume than just saying I took a 30-hour course. So I went off on a tangent there. Any questions on that? Great. Now, so we talked about this already. Certifications prove competency through examination. It's a higher level achievement. All right. KSAs, knowledge skills and education, or knowledge, skills, and abilities. Okay. They do allow you to use post-nominal designations. Joe Smith, CSP or MSP, et cetera, be careful with these agencies that say, we've got these certifications. Typically certifications have to be accredited by a separate party. Maybe it's ANAB or NCCA. There's other qualified certifying agencies out there, but if you're kind of going through the list and you're not sure, find out if this certification has been accredited by an outside agency. And then we talked about this already. There's typically eligibility requirements, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. Okay, common safety certification, folks, there is a lot to unpack on this slide. We do have what we call here at NASP a Master Safety Professional and Certified Safety Director. These are, again, exams that you have to sit for. Now, I would love to say that NASP is the top of the line as far as what is the most well-known out there, but we're not yet, because we just started offering these certifications in the last 2 years. The most well-recognized certifying agency out there is the Board of Certified Safety Professionals, and they offer the Certified Safety Professional and Associate Safety Professional. Now, you might ask yourself, well, okay, then what's the difference between an MSP and a CSP, or a CSD and an ASP? Okay, the differences are that it's the blueprint of the exam. Initially, CSP and ASP were based on engineering concepts. back in the 70s and 80s, there wasn't a safety professional per se, because they were just rolling out with regulations back then. But there were lots of safety engineers. These days, less than 3% of us in the safety field have an engineering degree. So the CSP and ASP do have more mathematical and engineering concepts. You're going to be bringing a calculator to that exam. They're not as heavy into that as they were, but there is definitely a lot more than our master safety professional or certified safety director. Ours are more regulatory in nature. We jokingly refer to ours as kind of the working person's CSP, in that we are more regulatory based. So OSHA standards and ANSI standards and other consensus standards and safety management systems and things like that. I'm not saying one's better than the other. It's odd. The reason we created these was that we thought there needed to be a track for individuals that didn't have a standard 4-year degree. Okay. You have to have a 4-year degree to sit for the CSP. You do not have to have a 4-year degree to sit for a master safety professional. You can have a high school diploma and still have a certain number of years in the field. It actually has to be 7 years in the field to qualify for sitting for exam. And the reason we thought about that, and I'm going to tell you, we are big advocates for higher education, and I'll give you an example of that here in a second. But for a variety of different reasons, let's face it, 35 to 40% of us in OHS and AHS do not have a formal degree. And yet we have had 17, 20, 25 years of experience, but we can't put a professional designation behind our name that's higher recognized. So we created these for that type of people. Oddly, we have more BCSP people that already have these certifications that are sitting for our exams, basically because they want more designations. Okay, so that's yes.
There is a question
Sure.
related. How do we know if and when we can use the certification acronyms after our name?
When it is a certification versus a certificate. Typically, and I'm going to tell you this, I see people using certificate designations behind their names all the time. It's not illegal. You're not going to get in trouble for it. But anybody in the know will realize, and I'll give you an example. A lot of people use our CSM, our Certified Safety Manager, as a post-nominal designation. It's a certificate course. Is there anything wrong with that? No, technically it's not something that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to list that on your resume as higher education. But again, typically your post-nominal designations are only designed for those of you guys that have taken an exam, like one of these that are listed here, and passed that exam and have determined your competencies and qualifications through academic, experiential, and other credentials. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Excellent. IHMM is another good one. The Institute of Hazardous Material Management, they have a Certified Safety and Health Manager. Now that one is not yet accredited, but they are in the process. My understanding is they're in the process of accrediting it. They are most well known for their Certified Hazardous Material Managers, their CHMM. I had my CHMM for years, and I was dumb because I left the safety field for about 4 years. And I didn't recertify, I didn't keep my continuing eds, and I didn't pay my money. So I lost that designation, and eventually I'll go back and get it. But that's designed for people that are typically dealing with hazardous materials, maybe doing HAZWOPER training, a lot of RCRA and CERCLA. And if I'm throwing out acronyms that you don't do, then that's probably not the designation for you. BGEC also does the Certified Industrial Hygienist. That's the Board of Global EHS Credentialing. Folks, the CIH is one of those top dogs. If you qualify for it, and it is a pretty heavy educational background and a lot of testing, and it's going to be industrial hygiene. So you're going to be doing a lot of formulas for industrial hygiene monitoring, where that's lead, asbestos, combustible dust. It gets pretty intense. But I will say, if you've got the CIH post-nominal designation, you are going to be paid well for that position. And then even you folks have the Certified Professional Ergonomist. And I think there's some other designations that BCPE also recognizes. There's like a, what is it, like a certified human factors professional and some other ones out there, Melissa?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was waiting to read you one in the chat.
Oh, no problem. I was just talking about designations that are specific to the ergonomics field, like the CS, the CPE, and some of these others. I think there's a couple of them that are recognized by that agency.
Yes, mostly CPE, but I can get more of that info for anybody who's interested.
Yeah,
Can
I
I?
saw one called Certified Human Factors Professional and a couple others, but I think Melissa's right. The top dog in that field is probably the CPE.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Should someone who already has their CSP and CHMM go and study for the MSP? Is it time and money well spent?
Okay, that's a great, excellent question. Let me hold that because I've got a perfect slide that will lay that out for you. And from a financial perspective, and I hate to say this, but I look at it too as people that are hiring, stacking designations is not necessarily a bad thing. But then again, do you want to spend the money and the time and the effort? But I've got a slide that will touch upon that in a little more detail. Did you have any other questions on that, Melissa?
Oh, nope, there was just one that, sorry, that's my bad. It was just kind of expounding on that. Dominic, I'll get with you on the CPE.
Excellent. And I will say that to their credit, BCSP has come with some non-degree certifications, but they are lower level titles per se. Safety management supervisor, construction safety and health technician, certified instructional trainer, safety training supervisor, occupational health and safety technician. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think anything like that has value to it because again, those are certifications. You have to sit for that and take an exam. And none of these exams are give-me's. I can tell you, they're tough. This just kind of shows what our MSP track looks like. I'm not going to read this off to you, but basically you see that it breaks down a combination of academic experience, and then other qualified credentials. So that's just gives you an idea. You've got to qualify for these exams. You can't just say, hey, I've been doing this and I want to sit for the MSP or I want to sit for the CSP. See, there's the CSP one. Similar tracks, okay, but this one does require a 4-year degree. And I will say the CSP, you have to get your ASP before you get your CSP. Now, there's a couple of caveats on there. There's some ways that you can get around taking the ASP. That's called a GSP and a TSP. And these kind of are like equivalency things. So there's ways to get around taking the ASP. But for us, if you qualify for the MSP, sit for the MSP. If you only qualify for the CSD, you don't have to take the CSD to get the MSP. You do have to take the ASP to get the CSP, unless you take one of those little alternate routes through a GSP and a TSP. Did you guys get all that? Because you're going to have a quiz at the end of the. I need to make a song about this or something. Okay. So, folks, which one's right for you? It depends on where you're heading. You know, what road. I tell in these classes, or when I teach this stuff and when I teach my classes, you know, being in safety, it's like saying I'm a doctor. Okay, it's such a generic term. There are so many fields of expertise under that umbrella of safety. Sure, maybe you can be a general practitioner and have a little bit of knowledge in all the general industry and construction standards, or you can have specific designations in areas like I've got trainers that all they do is confined space rescue. I've got consultants that all they do is industrial hygiene. I've got people that just do occupational health. ErgoFactor primarily does ergonomics. So it just depends on what direction you want to head. And obviously the cost of the exam and do you have availability and time to train for this stuff? What are your employer's requirements? Do they recognize these fees? Do they think it's important? Okay, this is the type of things that you need to determine whether that certification is right for you. And a little bit more on that question that we were answering earlier, does it really matter? And I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of two primary school of thoughts on this. hey, I've got 20 years of safety experience. I know what the heck I'm talking about. Okay. I don't need a certification. I don't need a piece of paper. I can go out on your site and tell you all the hazards. I can write plans and programs. The problem with that, and I'm not saying that's wrong, the problem with that is from an HR perspective. Because when you send out your resume and you don't have some of these designations or academic background, sometimes you don't even make it to the final list. And I think that sucks, but it's just a reality of our business. And I'm probably guilty of it too. If I had two equally qualified candidates, let's say they both had 10 years of experience, and one had a degree in OHS and one didn't, probably, unless I interviewed them, I just liked the one person better, but I'd probably go with the academic background better. You can see on this slide that generally speaking, you add more credentials. This is from the National Safety Council. No, I think this one was actually ASSP. Okay, NSC has a different one, but full-time SH&E professionals with at least one credential, on average 17.7 per year. Okay, so about 100 versus 82. And then additional degrees, it's typically another 10,000. And then doctoral degrees, I'm sorry, additional certifications, you typically add on 10 to 12,000. And then obviously from a safety education and academic background, that tends to bode well for us as well. So do I think you should get the MSP if you have a CSP and CHMM? It's up to you. Our MSP is different. So you're going to learn new things that you might not have had the knowledge, skills, and abilities when you took the CSP. Look at the blueprint. Go to the website and look at the blueprint. If there's stuff in there that you're like, you know what, I think I would like to have that credential, then go for it. If you're fine with what you got, then stay as it is. Okay. I am a believer in continuing education, whether it's certificates, certifications, or academic. One thing I've learned in this field is I learn something new every day, and I've been doing this for 33 years. Okay. Now, I want to make a big point on this because it's always a point of controversy, and I preface this presentation with this. OSHA is not a certifying agency. There is no OSHA approved course. You can be OTI authorized, but from certified from an OSHA perspective, typically means that you've gone through a third-party agency through a course and examination for specific roles, like crane operators. That's real big. You probably heard of NCCCO. Oh gosh, what are they? The National Commission for the Certification of Crane Operators. And you go through a week-long course and you're tested on that equipment. There's a written and a psychomotor skill that you actually operate that equipment. So that's the type of certified that OSHA says this individual should be certified in the use of this. Okay, so someone's passed an exam from an accredited organization related to that specific work topic, nothing more. I also want to make a point of this. Technically, the employer is the individual who certifies an individual as competent. I don't certify myself as competent. My company says, you know what, Eric, you've done a train the trainer course. You have the academic background. You have experience operating a forklift or plugging and patching a drum. So we certify based on this documentation that you have this stuff in place, that you're certified to do what you do. And it's interesting, you know, examples like Haswalper and forklift, they specifically recommend, they don't mandate it. It's one of those, and if you guys see I'm doing the air quotes, they're non-mandatory guidelines, and they say you should go through a train the trainer course. And that's one of the things we offer is Haswalper train the trainer and these other train the trainer courses, because OSHA highly recommends it. Because if somebody gets hurt or killed because of your training or the lack of your training, it can reflect poorly, and it can come back to get you through the court system or OSHA fines and citations. And that's a topic for another day from a liability standpoint, having proper documentation on all this stuff in place. All right. Now, so we talked about certificates and certifications and what OSHA deems certified. And by the way, before I jump into competent person, well, it's a good segue into competent person. Be very, very careful of going to these online courses that say, hey, take your competent person training through us, and it's a 15-minute class on trenching and shoring, and you get a piece of paper that says competent person. No, no, absolutely not. Now, we offer onlines, and there's legitimate companies that offer online training, but it only meets the safety portion of competent person training. Because look at the definition of competent person: one who's capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards in surroundings or working conditions which are unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to employees, and who has authorization to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate them. Okay, the authorization is the big point. Just because somebody took a 30-minute program doesn't mean, as me, the employer, is going to say, you know what, you can shut this down if you see unsafe work conditions, right? Only the competent person can do that. So that's a big one. And just be careful and make sure the competent person is a combination of training and experience. I like mnemonic devices like T. That's training, experience, and authorization, but they have to meet all three of those. So then, like, I've got a slide on the trenching. The trenching, that's one of those that there are specific requirements for competent persons. So you got training, you've got experience, you know how to identify hazards, and you can shut down the site if there's an issue. All right. Be careful in what the context is used. Some of these standards add specific requirements that need to be met by that person. That's going to be additional training. I see competent person in at least 19 different construction regulations. We just got a couple there: lead, hoisting, scaffold. There's tons of others. Confined space entry in construction mentions competent person. Silica mentions competent person. Steel erection also meant. There's 19 of them. It says competent person, that person that can have the stop work authority, training, and experience. So that's what makes you a competent person. Not taking an online course. That might be part of it, but that's not all of it. And that should be in writing at your facility. XYZ people are competent persons, and then have the background material in your file folders that they've had the proper training and they've had X amount of years of experience. I will tell you, a good thing to do is, you do these competent person training for pieces of equipment. Have your vendor come in, because if I train on a piece of equipment that the controls are different than the ones that are on site, that's an issue. Have your vendors come in and do the training on the individual pieces of equipment. It'll save yourself a lot of time, effort, and headaches to try to figure out controls yourself, because every piece of equipment is different when it comes to stuff like that. Now, that's different. A competent person is different than qualified person. So qualified person, and again, it depends on the context. Here's the specific definition that OSHA talks about: a person who, by possession of a recognized degree, but not just a degree, maybe it's a certificate or professional standing, maybe they're an expert witness, okay, or by who extensive knowledge, training, experience, successfully demonstrated the ability to resolve problems relating to subject matter, the work or project. Well, that kind of sounds like a competent person, doesn't it? It's not always the same person. A competent person can also be qualified, but a qualified is not necessarily a competent person. Okay, so qualified, they might have more technical expertise, but they might not have the expertise in hazard recognition or the authority to stop the hazards. Okay, think of a qualified electrician. I've got an example of this in a slide. I might have my master certification in electricity, but if I come to your site and you've got specific equipment I've never worked on, that doesn't make me competent. I'm probably going to have to shadow some individual that's very, very familiar with the equipment, and then I could call myself competent person. But remember, competent person has the ability to stop the work. And you look at this as an example of electrical. You got unqualified persons. So they've had basic electrical safety. And then qualified skills and techniques. Hey, they got this distinguish exposed live parts, determine nominal voltage, know the clearance distance, and lots of other stuff through 331 through 335. So that qualified person has to have the training on your specific site to call them a qualified person to be able to do the work that they're going to do. And folks, that gets into some real technical stuff that goes above and beyond this course, which is, minimum approach distances, prohibited, restricted, art class distances. Qualified people can go in and work on the piece of equipment, but they have to have personal protective equipment. Unqualified person has to stay out of these approach distance zones. So it gets real technical when you're talking about qualified. Same with entrenching. A competent person, they got to identify trench hazards and authority. We talked about that. A qualified might be there to design protective support systems. Folks, I know a lot of you might not know trenching standards, but if you go more than 20 feet, you have to have a professional engineer sign off on what's called tabulated data to make sure that that stuff's not going to cave in on them if they've got the proper shoring or benching, sloping, all these different systems in place for these really deep trenches. And you have to have a professional engineer. That person's not going to stop the work. They're just going to sign off that this particular system met the requirements and did what it was supposed to do. Okay. So any questions on qualified versus competent? Excellent. Now, we talked about certificates. We talked about certifications. We talked about competent and qualified. Folks, we are an advocate for higher education. I get it that, not all of us are 20, 25, 30 years old. We have families, we have obligations, we have work. So it's hard to go back to school and get a degree in some of this stuff. But if you have the opportunity, I highly recommend it. Now, we are partners with Columbia Southern University. They're probably one of the most well-recognized non-traditional schools. This is going to be all online training. What I like about CSU and why we became partners with them is they'll take all of your life experience through certificate courses or other training, or maybe you had a year and a half of college and you quit or you got an associate's, and they'll transfer that to academic credits. Okay, it's pretty cool. You can actually get up to 90 of your semester hours for a bachelor's degree. So you only have to have 120 hours. So in other words, you could potentially transfer 75% through courses and other training, as long as you can prove it. And then you're 3/4 of the way to get a bachelor's degree in OHS. That's not saying that's always, and there's an application process. If you're a member of NASP, all of that's free. They'll look at it for you for free. There's no obligation. And I like them. I like working with Columbia Southern University. I'd be curious, maybe after this is over, whether or not anybody else is set through CSU. And I'm not going to read you through that, but basically, generally speaking, 40 hours gives you a full semester hour of college credit. So, I mean, it adds up. If you look at our SPC, that's 242 hours. It adds up. Folks, there's other reputable OHS universities. If yours isn't on there, I apologize. But Waldorf and East Kentucky and Oklahoma State, ECU, Houston and Central Missouri, all have very, very good EHS, OHS programs. There is a link right there, and that gives you the top 20 in the country, not just based on their program, but based on financial feasibility. So there's lots of them out there. I don't have time to go into everyone. That's if you want to get a degree in OHS, if you don't already have one.
There is a question.
Yes.
Is there an excavation and confined space train the trainer?
There is. There are both of those. We offer a confined space entry and rescue train the trainer. We actually do that on the battleship USS North Carolina here in Wilmington. That's 40 hours of a lot of rescue. There are other agencies that offer trenching and shoring train the trainers. We offer it. Other agencies, there's very credible companies that do the train the trainer. It ranges from about 24 to 40 hours for the trenching that I typically see. The only difference between a trenching or a confined space and some of these others is the how to train and what you have to train others on. So there has to be a piece on the how to train, what kind of testing, what kind of things you have to do. That's what makes it a train the trainer. That goes back to that Z490.1 and 490.2 is that you make sure you know how to train others on the topic that you've actually picked. Okay. You know, as you progress through your career, and I get this a lot, it's like somebody listed an EHS technician and they're offering $40,000 a year. Well, that's crap. And I'm overqualified for that. And why are they? And I tell people, technically, and this is not 100% for 100% of the country and 100% of you might be an EHS technician in California and making $90,000 a year because you live in California, right? A lot of people ask me about what's an acceptable salary for individuals in EHS and OHS. There's a lot of surveys about out there, but it's really based on your location geographically and the type of stuff. But generally speaking, you're going to start out as a technician, maybe move to a specialist, supervisor, and then coordinator, and then you're a safety manager and director or professional. And I see these two intertwined interchangeably. I just want people to know it just depends on what the company is looking for. If you're out there just doing inspections, then you might be a technician. If you're overseeing an entire program and you've got multiple sites, then you're probably going to be a director. So there's just a kind of a hierarchy from a safety perspective. Any questions on that aspect of it? I typically get a lot of, well, they've got this title for me, but I really do this. You know, if you're in a position that you can only move laterally, that might be an issue for you if you want to be a safety director where you're typically overseeing multiple facilities. So I'm about to wrap it up. I do want to make just a couple of shameless plugs. We are kicking off our betas for our CSD and MSP exams. That happens November 1st. What's the difference? I'm not going to read all that. The difference is it's less expensive than our regular exam. A beta exam just means, hey, every couple of years, we got to change out and add new questions for low performing questions, not because we have to make them easier. It's just low performing because a psychometrician looks at it and says, I don't like this question. Let's throw it out. You'll still get the designation. You'll still get the designation. It just takes a little longer because we have to have everybody go through it and then correlate their results and figure out which exam questions stay and which go. It is a little bit longer than our standard test. It is 175 questions, but we give you an extra 30 minutes to do it because those are the new questions that we're going to add to the new exams as the exam matures. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And a lot of people ask about, we get a lot of people calling in about our resume, about their resumes. We do have one of our individuals that's going to speak at a Safety Connect conference. We're partners with a company called Safepedia, and he does a whole thing on resume building, and he's done lots of them. I've done lots of them. Just wanted to throw that out there because it kind of correlated to this presentation that we had. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
There's a couple of questions here for you, Eric.
Yes.
Again, they wanted to, and I think you addressed this. I think you said you did, but they asked, do you have excavation training or TTT?
Yeah. Yes, we do. I mean, we offer it. Other companies offer it. There's a lot of good programs out there on excavation, train the trainers. And again, the only difference is you're going to get the information you need to disseminate to your students in addition to being trained on what to look for on like soil classifications and different kinds of systems. You know, there's a lot under 1926, 652 and 653, which are your trenching and competent person standards. I mean, it's intense. I've gone through the training. If you're talking about a train the trainer that's less than 3 days, I wouldn't even waste my time. That's probably not a good thing to do.
There's a question in here. It says, I have trouble with actual program management. I know the regs, but when it comes to running the program/department, I struggle. Is there training for EHS or SHE management?
On what was the first part of that?
I have trouble with actual program management. I know the regs, but when it comes to running the program/department, I struggle. Is there training for HSE or EHS management?
So there is, we get a lot of that. You'll get that some in the certified safety manager, but we have upper level courses that really focus. Guys, if you're not hearing this term bounced around, then I would be surprised. Safety management systems. Now, you know, there's the safety management system from the perspective of just that general, hey, you got to have management commitment, employee involvement, hazard identification, corrective action, safety training and education, and program evaluation. Every single safety management system out there, whether it's ANSI Z10 or the California's I2P2 or the ISO 45001, they're all based on those. Now, if you're talking about really the development of specific safety programs like lockout, tagout, and confined space entry, okay, there's companies like us that are out there that do that training too. That, hey, what elements do you have to have in a lockout, tagout program? Which, by the way, if you don't have machine specific procedures, you don't have a lockout, tagout program. But we provide that training. There's other companies that provide that, but you probably want to look under, you know, program management. That would be a safety director certificate that we do, or a safety professional certificate, or some of these other online courses that will do program management. Just throwing out some competitors. 360 does a pretty good job. They're a little bit less, you know, some of them are just an hour, 2 hours. Click Safety, pretty decent, but they're typically shorter courses as well. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Couple more for you.
Hit
Is
me.
there, these two kind of go hand in hand, so I'm going to read both. Is there additional beta after November? And is there a training program to go along with the beta?
Okay, so the beta starts November and ends in January. Yes, the betas, we're required to do betas, but it's based on how many tests that are produced. Typically us and BCSP and some of these other IHMM, typically it's like every 3 to 5 years. Okay, but because our program is what, 2.5 years old, we're already due, because a lot of people took it and now we're due to update. But yeah, I wouldn't wait for the beta unless you wanted to wait another 3 years, because then after January, it'll go back to the regular price and it'll be the regular test. And then we do have prep courses for both the CSD and the MSP. They are online prep courses. We will be having some regular instructor-led prep courses, but we're already scheduled out through the end of 2023. So it probably wouldn't help you for the betas. I would do the online prep course instead. And it's good. It's going to give you sample questions and go over each part of the blueprint and say, you definitely need to know this, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't give you the answers to the actual questions, of course, but it gives you similar worded questions.
Can you guess what the next question is?
What is
how
the next
much?
question?
How much are those?
Yeah, the prep courses are $595. I think the prep course for the MSP might be a little bit like the prep course for the CSD is $550, and then the other one's $595, but I'll double check. I don't handle any of that department. I've got a whole staff that keeps those prices, but for whoever's attending this, I'll be sure and do like a little follow-up, and if you guys are interested in prices, or just jump on our website. It's going to be on our drop-down menu. It's at the very top that says certifications, and you'll see beta, because we are really promoting that beta. We want to get, it's really only good for the first 100, but we want to knock that out. I think we're at like 55 people that have signed up for it, and it's not till November. So it'd be a good one for you guys that if you're qualified, remember, you got to do the application process. You got to be approved. Then you study for the exam, sit for the exam, get your results, and then continue with your continuing education units. Every certification out there requires some form of continuing education. We specifically says it has to be continuing education. Other agencies say, hey, well, you can sit on a board, or you can go to a conference, or you can do this. That's fine, but you have to maintain it, because you don't want to be a dummy like me and lose your certification because you didn't keep up with your CEUs.
Michelle, just to answer your question, we did record this session and we will share it. There were a few other questions, Eric, if you still have some time.
Sure.
Which certification would you recommend to someone that is just starting their career in the safety field?
Such a good question. Well, here's the reality of that situation. You wouldn't qualify for a real certification if you're just starting out. And think about it, that makes sense, right? Because I don't feel comfortable in certifying you to this level if you don't have at least this academic and experiential background. The best you could probably do is if you had a degree, the least amount of experience we require for our CSD would be 2 years with a degree. Then you could qualify for our CSD, and then as you get more experience, you could move up to the Master Safety Professional. And then you might want to look at some of BCSP's lower level, but I think most of them require 4 to 5 years of experience. If you wanted something, and I will, not to do the shameless plug again, we have a lot of people that are new to it sit through our CSM. There are no prerequisites. It's not a certification. It is a certificate, but it is extremely well recognized in the field. If you're really new, be careful because it can be overwhelming. I just taught the CSM last week, and we didn't have people pass our test because they'd had only like 6 months of experience. So if you're really, really new, take the 30-hour compliance and then take something like our CSM or some of these other advanced safety things that I showed you on the beginning of the slides. The NSC is a good one. The COS is a good one if you're in construction. But I would take at least an introductory with the 30-hour just to get just to absorb some of these regulations, because man, when you get into these 40-hour management courses where we're firing this stuff at you and assuming that you know it, it can be a little tough.
One more question, and then Jessica, I think, has a question. Does the CSMC require CEUs?
It does not. So our certificates, like the CSM and the CSMC and some of these others, they don't require continuing education. They just require you to recertify them every 3 years. And all that is there is a fee to recertify, just like every agency, there's a fee. But then you retake a test. Now, you don't have to sit through the final thing to recertify. In other words, you don't have to sit through the entire course. You can, and I recommend it, but that's one of those that we just want to test to make sure that you still have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do it. So there is a recertification exam. For us, it's every 3 years on the certificate courses. On the certification, you do have to have CEUs, and it's also every 3 years. BCSP, it's every 5 years. Our board of directors that we set up as a nonprofit, they're not even members of NASP. They didn't feel comfortable with every 5 years. They said we felt like we need to be recertified every 3 years. Does that make sense?
And then Jessica, did you want to ask a question? You have a hand raised here. You should be able to speak. Where are you? No, okay.
See, first Anna and then Jessica. I see the troublemakers in this webinar.
If anybody have any other questions, feel free to speak up. We can stay on the line for a minute. Otherwise, Eric, thank you. What a fantastic presentation. Lots of great questions, a lot of discussion generated. Thank you all for staying with us. Again, if you don't mind, upon exiting, just filling out that small survey so that we can continue to provide well-rounded ergo forums for you. I'd appreciate it. And then, like I said, we'll stick around if you have any other questions. Eric, thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Folks, stay in touch with me if you need anything, and we'll reach out with you with a little follow-up on some of the stuff that we touched upon. And again, Ergo Factor, thanks for the opportunity.